This video is going to be my first preview of the Ravens' Week 3 matchup, their visit to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. Really a must-win at this point. I think if you look at the Ravens' schedule, their schedule upcoming in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then as it pushes out further to look at the rest of the season. I'm going to focus this preview just solely on the Cowboys' offense versus the Ravens' defense. About all I've had time for, so consider this preview number one, maybe late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, since it's a 4 p.m. start or after 4 p.m. start. I'll be able to push out a second preview of the Ravens offense. I really haven't watched a ton of the Cowboys defense because to me, I think on some level it doesn't matter. And what I mean by that is this. The Ravens, through 2 games, have very distinct patterns of what they've been really good at on defense and things that they've struggled with clearly. They're the number 1 team in the NFL, I believe, in terms of rushing yards against, 2.7 yards per carry. Only allowed 99 rushing yards through 2 games. Sets up well, if you ask me, for some of the film that I have watched about the Cowboys running game. Not saying that they can't run the ball effectively over the course of 17 games, but this particular matchup looks like one to me where the Ravens, unless the Cowboys change their style and go to some of the things that have for the last 2 or 3 years given the Ravens run defense more trouble. 11 personnel run game into the boundary. Did see 2 hints at that, Rams-ish type of concepts, and I'll show you those a little bit during this video. Basically, it's jet sweep and some Jill ISO stuff. But the Ravens' pass defense, giving up 514 yards through 2 games to Patrick Mahomes and Gardner Minshew. Teams are completing a high percentage of their passes against the Ravens. They're making big plays. They're able to go to particular locations on 3rd down. I don't think some of our higher profile guys at the safety position and even the outside corner position have been playing well. If Wiggins is healthy and a go, I think that's a good thing for the Ravens. On the injury report side, the Cowboys had numerous guys listed earlier on the week. One of the reasons why I wait to do previews until Saturday morning is for Sunday games, that is to see the injury report, the final one on Friday, and it looks like there's no injury designation for pretty much everyone that the Cowboys had listed: CeeDee Lamb, Trayvon Diggs, and everyone else. So no concern there, and that's where we're going to start this video, to be honest with you. If the Ravens are able to limit CeeDee Lamb, I think they've got a great opportunity to come here and win this football game. Dak Prescott, I think Dak Prescott is a guy who's willing to throw the ball wherever the play takes it. Are there times where he's looking for a certain matchup? Of course, just like any quarterback. But in watching the film from the first 2 weeks of the year, which was a huge disparity in week 1, their performance against the Browns on the road, winning the game, going away, and then losing at home to a Saints team that seems like they're on a roll. It's even still across those 2 games, there is consistency, if you ask me, in that Dak Prescott will go where the play takes him. And I think that's a good thing for the Ravens in some ways. There will be a time, if the Ravens are able to play the type of football that they want to play on offense and defense, there will be a time such that the Cowboys go into pass mode, and pass mode only, very similar to what the Raiders did in the second half of their road win last week in Baltimore. And in some ways, I think that's a bad thing for the Ravens. And let me be clear on what I mean by that. If they choose to isolate CeeDee Lamb over on our left side against Brandon Stevens, or at times against Marlon Humphrey on our left side, excuse me, I misspoke a moment ago, then that gives them the opportunity to get the ball to their best player and force Zach Orr into some more, quote, predictable coverages. One thing that's interesting about CeeDee Lamb is they use him on jet sweep stuff often. Their run game, all 3 of their running backs are averaging 4 yards per carry or less. I think I've got 3 jet sweep plays through the 2 games of film that I have. As we get further into the season, it'll be more difficult to keep up with some of this anomalous stuff. But really cool. I love the jet sweep. As Ravens fans, we're familiar with it because the Rams ran it to death against us last year, and the dive concept off of it. It's interesting that they're running this with CeeDee Lamb, their best player. Of course, we know most of his work is done in the pass game, and I think I'll show you 8 targets here from so far this year. So I think Dak Prescott throws a really nice fade or sideline ball up the right sideline, generally against man coverage. This is a 2nd and 10. I think he's just looking at the middle of the field. He knows where he's going with this football. They do have what's set up a swing pass out here with potential blockers out in front. So probably got a choice in where he wants to go. And when he sees the one-on-one, he's going to take it. The Ravens play so much man-to-man on the backside into the boundary. And what I mean by that is before the motion, you had the running back's feet over here. The Ravens play so much man with the will linebacker to the boundary and the boundary side corner that this is the type of thing that I think the Cowboys are going to look for early to see if it's there. They do a lot of sprint out stuff. I think I have 5 instances of what I would call sprint out or semi-roll. This one we'll call semi-roll. There's a little bit of a mesh between Ezekiel Elliott crossing the quarterback's face and then Dak Prescott booting out here to the right. Not necessarily sure I'd call it a boot play. I think this is designed to go up top to CeeDee Lamb from the backside. The corner, Denzel Ward, kind of falls off. And so what I mean by falls off, this corner down here is going to get depth and play a role in this route from CeeDee Lamb. Not necessarily from a pass deflection standpoint or anything like that. It's interesting to me that they're in so much sprint out, and it's to the right or to the left. Dak Prescott can throw the ball moving to his right or his left. Not that this is a exceptional throw by any means. I'll give the end zone angle so you can see a little bit more of it. But they do a lot of sprint out in that, and that is something you don't see as much in the NFL, in my opinion. At least from the film that I've got of them, like I said, 5 instances of either sprint or semi-roll, trying to get him moving outside the pocket and look for routes that are emanating or originating probably from the other side of the field. Anytime that CeeDee Lamb is in the slot position, I am super interested in this matchup because if the Ravens were to take Marlon Humphrey or Brandon Stevens and put him in there, obviously it looks like man. I'm really interested if we get Kyle Hamilton here because the route that CeeDee Lamb is super effective at over the course of years from a slot position is a slant. And one thing I know about Kyle Hamilton, who I don't think has been playing well, let's put it this way, he hasn't had an impact yet, is one-cut routes do not beat him. And so we've got a matchup here, if you ask me, when CeeDee Lamb is in the slot of a guy who generally gets high percent targets on this route. And then Kyle Hamilton, when he's playing the nickel, someone who doesn't get beat on one-cut concepts, meaning there's no double move, there's no fake or shake slant or shake out. It's just one cut slant. Hamilton is usually right there. Cool little play, somewhat related to what I was just talking about. This is CeeDee Lamb down here at the bottom of the screen. As an aside, I think Alontae Taylor is playing super for the Saints as a nickel defender. It's a fake screen to, I think it's Torbert or Tolbert, as from the number 3 position. And these are the types of things that quarterbacks, I think, right now can do to the Ravens to kind of move or shift players, get them to overreact. I did a video about the Ravens' coverages a couple of days ago, whereby I think they're just moved too much by the quarterback's eyes at times. And in this case, a slight little pump fake. I would worry about this if I were a Ravens fan from the standpoint of defenders being moved horizontally by the slight pump fake from Dak Prescott, and then in this case, CeeDee Lamb brings this underneath, kind of ends up shielding some Saints defenders, and kind of end up shielding Alontae Taylor, CeeDee Lamb with a 14-yard gain. How do the Saints safeties compared to the Ravens? You have Tyrann Mathieu and Will Harris, a guy who couldn't start for the Lions last year as a corner. He actually played outside corner against the Ravens in that blowout win at home against Detroit in Week 7. And now he's starting as a strong safety type player for the Saints. Probably a better suited position for him. This is 12 personnel by the Cowboys. If it's not CeeDee Lamb from 11 personnel or some of the other... Jake Ferguson's a really good tight end, by the way. He was out last week, and I think that had an impact against the Saints. Comparing this matchup, the Raiders having Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers, to the Cowboys having CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson. No, Jake Ferguson doesn't stack up there, but he's a talented tight end who run blocks well, and when he was out last week, I think that was a factor. Dak Prescott has a lot of confidence in himself and in CeeDee Lamb. Kind of like this little sail out, and the safety, Matthew, and I think it's Adebo, 29, also a very underrated corner, are both there in the window. Call it a double team, call it whatever you want. The out concept is there. CeeDee Lamb not only catches it, but ducks underneath of the two tacklers, takes it to the house for a 65-yard gain. I think this is the type of stuff that they will try to attack us with if and when they go 12 personnel. I suspect that 12 personnel might be a place where they're going to try to go, and here's why. If and when you put two tight ends over here, the Ravens are going to do something. You can kind of see the safety's foot. They're probably going to do something, roll a safety down. And what that would do is possibly leave CeeDee Lamb with more space in a one-on-one backside. The Ravens safeties will be stressed, in my opinion, to try to help out Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevens and Wiggins if he's a go. That will be a matchup. Those three matchups, Lamb against our three outside corners, I think is probably one of the bigger determining factors in the game. I do think or suspect that our pass rush is going to be able to get there some. I'm not going to focus this video necessarily on the Cowboys' offensive line, but from what I'm seeing, there are times where both the right tackle and the left tackle are there to be had with upfield moves. Basically outside rushes, not necessarily a speed rush. There'll be some technique, a chop, a rip, or something thereafter. I think the Ravens' pass rush against this defensive line is clearly going to be a factor, but our ability to cover CeeDee Lamb, to me, is point number one, or should have been point number one this week for Zach Orr. How are we going to limit our exposure to some of those one-on-ones that beat us up last week by the Raiders and that CeeDee Lamb has put out on film in 2024 and previous seasons? The Ravens are at 38% in terms of their third down stops on defense, and the Cowboys, I think, are converting 37% of theirs. I'm going to show you 4 examples of CeeDee Lamb on third down. Actually, the first 4 are from 2023 film. But the diversity of the routes is pretty cool to watch, to be honest with you, even though as I'm watching the film, I'm projecting or thinking how this could hurt the Ravens. This is against the Giants. Obviously, you got the Wink Martindale as the defensive coordinator. So you got some crazy press man coverages with no help. This ends up being a pick shield route with a wheel by Lamb, who fell down on the play. Tight end Ferguson definitely shields his defender. Again, it's 2023 film, 49, 50-yard gain. The diversity of the routes is there. The Ravens have their hands full. If you ask me, trying to stop this guy for a 4-quarter game, it would behoove the Ravens to get in the lead. And then if Dak Prescott is going to go into pass-only mode, basically throwing the ball 7 out of 10 plays, then we want to be able to predetermine that, I should say. 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7 is a predetermined known passing situation. These are mostly 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8. They use the NFL Pro website. If you haven't checked that out, I would highly recommend it to go grab as many of these as I could from 2023 and then 2024. CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, if you ask me, know what each other are going to do, number one. Number two, Dak Prescott seems really good at sniffing out. Now this one becomes kind of obvious, but really good at sniffing out blitzes and making checks at the line of scrimmage. I think he's in complete command of the offense. Obviously last year, this is filmed against the Rams last year, but this year as well, even though it's a new offensive coordinator, same head coach, probably heavily involved in the offense. CeeDee Lamb is a guy that in-breaking routes, out-breaking routes, vertical stuff, comebacks, screens, jet sweeps, they do a lot of things to get him the ball, if you ask me. The pass rush that the Ravens will try to generate, I think Justin Madubuike and the edge defenders can cause problems for this offensive line. I'm not saying we have 7 sacks already. I'm not saying that we're going to go in there and devastate their offensive line. They're certainly by no means horrible, but there have been enough times where I've seen pressure, from 2 guys on the same play, that the Cowboys' offensive line looks like, especially on third down, we can attack them with some of our myriad of blitz calls. This is a really nice adjustment, obviously, by Dak Prescott to get the ball to Ezekiel Elliott. It's a 3rd and 6, 3rd quarter. It ends up going down. That's his longest game of the season, Ezekiel Elliott, by the way. And I will cover the run game here in a little bit. If you're a Ravens fan and you're disappointed to see all Cowboys film, this is kind of what I do on Saturday mornings. I try to preview the other team as best I can. I've had, about a day and a half to watch film, so it's going to be incomplete. Really nice fade routes by Dak Prescott in terms of where he delivers the football. This one probably intentionally underthrown. It is Tolbert, whose name I mispronounced earlier, against Paulson Adebo. And this is probably what we want to do to this Cowboys team in terms of forcing them to beat us with particular guys. So this ends up being an out route by CeeDee Lamb, and you can see the safety, Tyrann Mathieu, is trying to drive on that, along with Alontae Taylor playing man from an inside leverage. So basically double team, bracket, leverage, whatever you want to call it. And Dak Prescott recognizes it, goes up top. These are the types of things that we're going to have to live with from a matchup standpoint if we're able to get in the lead, if we're able to put this Cowboys team in 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7. It's not that Dak Prescott's not mobile and can't scramble, but these are the chunk plays that we've got to avoid. The 40, the 50-yard gains on 3rd and 6, or just the simple slants to CeeDee Lamb. Sprint out stuff, again, it shows up more on the film than I would have expected. When you begin to watch film of a team like I did, I think it was Wednesday evening, and you see sprint out, you're like, oh, that's interesting. I saw it one time. And then as it pops up a second, a third, a fourth time, at times late in the half, you're running sprint out. Maybe there's 8 seconds left or something like that, and you don't have any timeouts left. You're running sprint out to get the quarterback out of the pocket, such that if one of these routes is not available, you can just throw it out of bounds because of the rule set, because you don't have a timeout. You don't want to risk a sack. That's not why the Cowboys are doing this. I don't necessarily know if they don't trust certain guys. They've run sprint out to the right. They've run sprint out to the left on 3rd down, on 1st down, etc. A double slant where they're obviously trying to get CeeDee Lamb open. This is a 3rd and 6 in the 3rd quarter. So he's going to bring his route back just at the snap and then over the middle. It ends up being a pass deflected or a tip pass by JOK. Basically, shielded release for CeeDee Lamb. A funnel. Look at all three of these guys are in the seam, the same vertical seam. They're not all going in the same direction, but it allows CeeDee Lamb to bring this route back to the inside. I think it's Newsome is there to try to defend it. The Ravens had a play against the Chiefs where our DBs reacted in the same manner. And if you recall, Patrick Mahomes was able to hold on to the football a split second longer and kind of just float it over the top. So the receiver did one of these, and he floated it over the top to his receiver. I forget who it was and what the situation was, to be honest with you. 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7. I think the Ravens have got to be really exceptional in this game, trying to take away the slants to CeeDee Lamb, but it's not predictable. I mean, this is another in-breaking route from a slot position, multiple guys. This is 4th quarter here, by the way, so they're up big against the Browns. Multiple guys are going to be responsible for guarding CeeDee Lamb if we're trying to disguise our coverage, and that's the main point I want to make about him. If the Ravens want to get their best guy on him, who has physicality, who can keep up with him, and won't get dislodged physically, then it's Marlon Humphrey. If the Ravens want to stay unpredictable and keep Brandon Stevens to the right, Marlon Humphrey or Wiggins to the left, Hamilton or Ardarius Washington in the slot, and be unpredictable, then we won't know exactly. And the Cowboys won't either unless they put him on their left, which is what I think we'll see eventually. Trips to their right, Lamb as the X receiver to their left, our right, and then are we going to run Brandon Stevens over there and put him in the same matchup that we put him in basically in some ways with Devontae Adams last week? Let's switch gears a little bit and go to something that I kind of mentioned already. In fact, I've already shown this play. Jet sweep. Some concepts that are somewhat similar to what the Rams do offensively. Now, they don't major in this. In fact, I don't even know that the Cowboys minor in those concepts, those Sean McVay type concepts. But you do see enough of this, these jet sweep plays, and then the dive off of it to make me think that this could be a factor in the game. And additional, what I really like about this is you've got split flow with the running backs going in one direction, in this case to the offense's left, and then CeeDee Lamb running the jet out to the right. Really nice design to get him the ball out in space. Ends up being a 12-yard gain. This is 2nd quarter against the Browns, week 1, 21 personnel. The short motion across has got to be a trigger for the Ravens. Of course, you could have a complementary play built off of this where Dak Prescott keeps it and then Lamb slides out into the flats for a pass play, and or just give it on the direct flow to the running back behind the fullback. So a lot of things that could be implemented here or installed by the time we see it. This is, again, week 1 film. Jet sweep, really smooth. They clearly practice it a lot. Dak Prescott and him are in perfect timing, perfect relationship in terms of where CeeDee Lamb is when the ball is snapped. Basically, right around the guard tackle area when the ball is snapped, putting the backside edge defender in tremendous conflict. I'm wondering if the Ravens have a Kyle Van Noy to that backside by chance, if he happens to be there with his history of playing with the Patriots. And I would say a 3-4 structure in terms of the rules. Collisioning guys, tight ends that are trying to run out into the flats or not letting the back cross their face. The Ravens don't do a ton of that. Cowboys also run what I would call jet dive. Everyone runs jet motion. This is somewhat similar to a play that the Ravens run, jet dive. So you have the jet by, I think it's Turpin, number 9, going into the boundary. Doesn't seem like a huge threat, but you do have the tight end over there to potentially use as a lead blocker, so they theoretically could actually run this play. That tight end is a key because here he brings you back to the split zone. The cut downhill by Dowdell, who at this point I think him and Elliott are pretty much splitting time in the backfield. There was a lot of discussion about who was the starter. I mean, to me it seems obvious that those guys are, and that most NFL teams are going to share the load between multiple running backs, in this case 2, and then Deuce Vaughn actually acts as a third down back sometimes as well. So last piece that I would compare to the Rams, and I've only seen this one time. Again, we're talking 2 games. I think I have 68 plays saved up, is this 11 personnel run play that I would call a Jill ISO cutback. It's a Ezekiel Elliott for 7 yards on a 2nd and 8. I believe I'll give you the end zone angle of this one as well. So why do I call it cutback? Because I think initially the flow of the play is downhill, and then it's designed to cut here off of this block by Tolbert, the wide receiver. And when you get the end zone angle, you'll probably get a better idea of it. They're also asking the tight end to block out on a defensive end / outside linebacker. Since it's 11 personnel, you got a 4-2 box with, in this case, nickel defender walked up. The Jill ISO component is the tight end stepping out to the defensive end, and then the receiver stepping in to go block the nickel defender. Sometimes it's a frontside inside linebacker if the nickel defender doesn't happen to be there. You can see the nature of it. It ends up being a 7-yard gain, like I said. Again, they don't major in it, certainly not like the Rams do and other teams, but saw enough of the jet sweep, and in this case, one Jill ISO play that not many teams across the NFL run. Not many teams are asking their wide receivers to step inside the box and potentially have to block a frontside inside linebacker. Is a cool little element to their offense that I saw, and I wanted to bring it to your attention. Let's keep it on the ground, keep it focused on the run game. Here we'll have a handful of plays to kind of illustrate what you're going to get out of the Cowboys offense in terms of the run game. Again, Ezekiel Elliott and Dowdell split the carries. They both have 56 yards on the year. This is a touchdown by Ezekiel Elliott against the Browns in week 1. They're averaging 85 yards per game on the ground. Both of those guys are averaging less than 4 yards per play. Haven't been a ton of big splash plays in the run game. I use NFL Pro, like I said, so I was able to go sort by rushing play and grab a bunch of them. They kind of rotate those guys in and out. I think the safety to the tight end side is going to have to be a factor in this game, whoever that is. And usually it's going to be the boundary side safety. I'll kind of digress here for a moment, but I think it's related to the threat, and it's going to be related to the conflict that the Cowboys are going to create. So here you have the tight end, Ferguson. Again, he played in week 1. Check out this safety, reading the tight end. I'm not sure if I give you the end zone angle of this one. And it ends up being a 3-yard gain by Ezekiel Elliott. It's actually a trap concept. And the linebacker, 58, does a nice job as well. But the safety is there to finish. And I'll give you a couple plays here in a little while where I'll try to illustrate or show you the safety's eyes to the tight end side, what they're reading, what they're looking at. And I think that it's possible. This is the same play, end zone angle. So number 1, right here, reading the tight end. There's oftentimes when people are saying they're staring in the backfield, well, they don't necessarily know what the player is staring at, what they're looking at, what they're reading, and what they're keying. In many cases, they're reading the end man on the line of scrimmage, the tight end in this case, and then they fill downhill to get involved in the run fit. This is an example of, I think the Saints have walked up this inside linebacker, and my suspicion is the offensive line here have made some kind of call real quick, such that the left tackle just takes the D tackle down, and the left guard has to deal with the other defensive tackle. So basically, it's a trickle-down effect that leaves, I think it's Werner 20 unblocked. This is a third quarter run play against the Saints last week. They're down by a lot. I think it's 34 or 35 to 16. By walking that linebacker up, I think what the Saints did was someone on this interior offensive line recognized it, made a call real quick because they thought or suspected that 93 was going to stunt across the center's face, which he does. So 73 takes him, 60 takes the defensive tackle down. Werner is unblocked, so is the boundary side safety. We'll get back to him for a moment. Basically what I'm saying is I think that teams, and the Browns did this twice as well, I think teams are at times onto the Cowboys run game in terms of the situation. We know they're going to run right now, so they're doing things to try to influence or negatively impact the actual run concept. So let's talk about the safety here, looking right at the tight end into the boundary. There's no one outside of that safety in terms of his players other than the corner who's playing man on number one, the Z receiver out there. Will Harris sees the tight end block. Immediately his eyes shift, comes downhill. This is to my point I was talking about later. People will say, well, they're staring in the backfield. No, they're looking at a key. In some cases, on pass, guys are looking at in the backfield post-snap. But this is an example of reading your key, seeing a base block, and knowing I have C-gap to the boundary because we're in a six-man front. It's a 4-2 nickel. So it's one of the reasons why 11 personnel stresses defenses so much. 4-2 in the box, 6, and you have 7 gaps to try to account for. Doesn't work out. So someone, in this case the boundary side safety, got to be responsible for C-gap when he gets a base block by the tight end. Isn't involved in the tackle. Werner's unblocked because of unrelated issues on the other side where the Saints, I thought, walked the inside linebacker up and stunted, basically forced a trickle-down effect. So in any case, this is generally what you're getting from these run concepts. They are, I think, searching. The Cowboys are searching for something that'll work in terms of the running game. I think the Ravens have got to lock this down. I think they've got to stop, slow down seriously, or stop completely the Cowboys' run game such that they become one-dimensional. Another example of a boundary side defender, in this case it's a corner, reading the tight end, fitting off of the block. I think I give you the end zone angle for this one as well. You also have the defensive tackle is going to slide off of this down block by Tyler Guyton, who I think the Ravens were going to draft if he was there. So corner to the boundary is reading the tight end. Same exact scenario as what I described earlier. Tight end steps out to the defensive end, and as a result, that corner is now unblocked. You got to fill downhill. It's not necessarily about making the tackle every time, from a one-on-one standpoint. It's Emerson, I believe, who's a really underrated player, 23 for the Browns. It's not necessarily about making the tackle, making a big hit on the running back. It's about getting involved and being another player that shows up with, in this case, the defensive tackle and the edge defender. It doesn't seem like Dowdell or Elliott right now is getting a ton of space consistently. This happens to be one where they do. They're up by a lot. I think it's 27-10 at this point. We're looking at third quarter run play. 22 personnel, 1 fullback, 2 tight ends, all on the same side. So heavy tray left. Downhill run concept by Dowdell. Ends up surging forward for 10 yards. Same play, end zone angle, to get a sense of what they've created in terms of a 5-man surface, guard, tackle, 2 tight ends, and a fullback, all to the same side. Somewhat related to the play that I showed earlier where off-screen to the right was CeeDee Lamb, and he caught that sail out concept against the Saints and took it to the house for 65 yards. Although they are in 11 personnel a lot, I am actually somewhat more concerned going in about 12 personnel or 21 or 22 in this case, because they can, by formation, create a one-on-one, create more space to the backside for CeeDee Lamb. Hopefully I said that in a way that makes sense. Counterplay down into the boundary. It's tight end nobody. This is man, so a different reaction by number 5, Will Harris. When you get the end zone angle, I'll kind of annotate that. They bring CeeDee Lamb over here into the backfield in this joker set. Jokers means one running back to the right, one to the left of the quarterback who's in the shotgun. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb is not a running back, but he is in the backfield. So they're pulling a defender out of there and maybe trying to get some of these guys to slow up. The only thing is they're dealing with Demario Davis, who has seen it all and done it all at a very high level. End zone angle, same play. Talking about this read right here. Additional to that, 5 is in man on the tight end. That's why he's walked up really close. Great read by Davis on the pulling guards. You're getting a pulling guard, tackle who's presumably going to wrap up to the linebacker. And the tight end's trying to get down to Demario Davis, the backside inside linebacker. Davis digs underneath of it, disrupts Guyton as well. You get a nice job here trying to condense this or compress that kick-out block. Really know where to go. I mean, Dowdell does get 5 yards. It's counterplay into the boundary. A little bit slow developing, if you ask me. The Ravens' interior defensive tackles, Matabike, Washington, Pierce, and others, in my opinion, have to be disruptive. They've got to get up. Well, they do run trap. The Cowboys do, but they've got to get upfield and try to disrupt things and force things to bow back. This is that same jet dive that I talked about earlier. I won't say that I'm not impressed with the Cowboys' running game, but it certainly is not as impressive as their pass game. It looks to be very inconsistent. The Ravens, in my opinion, as I've stated before, would be well served to stop or completely slow down this run game, force them to being one-dimensional, which sounds paradoxical because we did the same thing to the Raiders last week, and nonetheless they were able to come back in the third and fourth quarter and absolutely shred our defense. So getting back to that same situation in week 3 on the road against the Cowboys doesn't sound like a preferred outcome, but it would mean that the Ravens would be in the lead and hopefully this time wouldn't turn the football over like we did in the third quarter on the drop pass by Bateman that ended up being picked off by Robert Spillane. And number 2, wouldn't go away from Derrick Henry, who was absolutely dominant in the third quarter against the Raiders' defense. Last point that I'll make here in terms of the Cowboys' offense and some of the things that I'm noticing they do. Again, I mentioned it earlier, Dak Prescott throws a really nice fade, particularly to his right side. It just seems to me like the ball comes out of this one's, a little bit underthrown. I suspect possibly intentionally. It's a 3rd and 6, like I said before. I feel like he throws a really nice ball deep down the right sideline. Not that there aren't passes completed deep down the left sideline or in the middle of the field, but this is just a particular spot on the field where I think the ball comes out nice and he seems to put the right pace and angle and trajectory on it. It's oftentimes a slot fade, like you saw there. Normally, a slot fade, the most common iteration of it is you're getting 2 stop routes and then a fade by number 2. In this case, I actually prefer this one better because of their personnel and who's lined up where. So it's a touchdown to Brandon Cooks on a 3rd and 5 against the Browns. Really, I thought, took advantage of the Browns' tendency to play so much man. But the timing of it is really cool. So CeeDee Lamb's running this little in cut, and then Cooks is running the slot fade. You're also getting an in cut by the number 1 receiver, Tolbert. And I think Dak Prescott pretty much knows where he's going with this football off the snap. That's why he brings the running back in from empty to try to gain another player in the pass pro to just generate or hold on to a little bit more time to get this throw off. Like I said, it's a 3rd and 5, kind of throwing it fading back, so there's no real coverage there. The Browns have messed this up. You can see post play, there's some communication by 1, 0, and 23 about what they should be in. It'll be interesting to see how much man the Ravens play versus zone versus split field coverages. It seems like so far this year in some of these known passing situations, the Ravens have often chose wrong. And that's an oversimplification because, like I said, the Ravens are making stops on the Ravens are only allowing 38% conversion rate when facing third downs. It's not far off at all from 2023 when it was 37% or 37.6 or something like that. The problem is the rest of the NFL is really good right now on third downs. The Steelers are below 20%, and other teams are below 30% as well, which is kind of anomalous compared to previous seasons. The Ravens, if you ask me, have to figure out a way to be multiple and adjust their calls on the field based upon where CeeDee Lamb is and what the threat looks like depending on the formation. So far this year, to me, it seems like the Ravens' coverage is called in the huddle, called before the offense lines up, and we just run it. Dak Prescott seems to be a guy that can not only sniff out the blitz and check into a different pass pro, or at least allocate extra assets, running back, tight end, to stay in and help, but also someone who understands where the weakness of each coverage is. I think it's a tremendous challenge. If it sounds like I have downplayed elements of the Cowboys' offense, I would say the relative weakness so far is obviously their run game. 56 yards so far on the year for Ezekiel Elliott, but 40 of those came in the first half against the Browns. I think he was like 10 carries for 43 yards or 10 carries for 41 yards in the first half against Cleveland in week 1. Thereafter, you're looking at about 14 or 16 yards rushing in the last 6 quarters. Dowdell also has 56 yards on the year. They're both averaging lower than 4 yards per carry. The Ravens only allowing 2.7 yards per carry. Yes, it certainly looks to be set up like the Ravens are going to be able to stop or slow down the run game significantly and then have to deal with the pass game in isolation. I think the Ravens got to be more multiple, more versatile, and simultaneously more aggressive in coverage because there's so many free releases, so many free runners at the receiver, tight end position. Guys are getting on top of our DBs, our secondary, so quickly that we're not reacting well. Number one. Number two, we spend so much time staring at the quarterback, and I covered that a little bit in a video I put out, I think, Friday morning, that when receivers are on top of us or already into or beyond their route stem and we're still staring at the quarterback, we're just affording too much space. I think Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton have got to play at a higher level if we want to go down there to Dallas and get a win. It's a must-win, in my opinion, at this point. You cannot start 0-3 and expect to get to where the Ravens want to in 2024. I don't know about you, I like the quotes coming out of the locker room, specifically Lamar and other guys, the focus that it sounds like they have. They've got to transfer and project that on the field, on defense, specifically against CeeDee Lamb and on third down. You guys let me know what you think of the preview. I understand that as a Ravens fan, if first of all, if you watch this long, thank you. But second of all, I understand as a Ravens fan that you may want to see Ravens film. This is what I do on Saturday mornings, generally try to preview elements of the other team's offense to give you an idea of what to look for when they line up in a particular formation. If the broadcast actually shows you the whole formation. I don't know about you, there's times where the ball's getting ready to be snapped and they still haven't shown the formation, and I'm trying to document personnel, formation, etc., and I can't even see it because the broadcast isn't showing it. So, in any case, this is my first preview for the Ravens' visit to play the Cowboys. Let me know what you think of the video in the comment section. If you think other Ravens fans would enjoy this preview, please consider grabbing a link to it, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach. I will try to address something that I think is the elephant in the room, the Ravens pass pro against Micah Parsons and some of the other guys that get to the quarterback for the Cowboys, because that's obviously a huge determining factor. I like to separate my previews into offense and defense because it helps me focus intently on the concepts that I think I'm trying to explain to you. Appreciate you guys' time.